A couple of weeks ago, I had the good fortune to be able to speak after dinner at the regional conference up in San Francisco, the Region 2 conference. 6 of the different district winners of the humorous contest got to give a showcase of their speeches, the funny speeches, after dinner. And in the audience were previous world champions and the international director and all of our district officers and area officers and all of these dignitaries. After our speeches, though, Darren LaCroix, a previous winner of the Toastmasters International contest, a world champion, got up and told everybody how to give a world champion speech. I wish he'd spoken before I'd gotten up, but no such luck. And it's true, what he gave us was the after dinner speech. I'd love to tell you the highlights of his speech, but I was in such shock from having spoken before all of the dignitaries that I didn't hear a word he said. Lucky for you, though, I was able to steal the notes of the person next to me, and so I'll just read them to you. Chicken with green beans. Oh wait, no, that's the menu. The main gist of what Darren talked about was respect your audience. Respect your audience. And so he gave some different tips to us about preparing your speech and the content that it should encompass. The main part of that is that you should be able to summarize your speech in 10 words. And he called those 10 words the foundational phrase of your speech. And those 10 words are, what do I want my audience to think differently after they hear my speech? And it should be 10 words or less so that 3 days later, they can tell you what the foundational phrase was. He also gave a lot of other examples of how to give good content in the speech and how to write a speech. But that's not what I'd like to talk about today. What I'd like to talk about today are the things that I remembered 3 days later after his speech. And those things were how to give a speech. How to give a speech so that you respect the audience. Things that I didn't do, and things that I will incorporate into my speeches. One thing he talked about was use holograms on the stage. Yeah, right. Right. What he means by that is, every time you're giving a speech, talking about a story, personalizing your story, ideally, you're going to be talking about different moments. For example, in Leslie's speech, she was talking about singing on the bus. What Darren suggests is that when you're talking about an event or a location, use one part of the stage for that location. So if we're talking about singing on the bus over here, and the bus is rolling along and we're singing "Oh, When the Saints Come Marching In," and then I'm talking about being in a classroom, I'm going to skip over to here to be in the classroom. So that when I'm talking to the teacher and I'm mouthing the words of learning that in class, the audience is actually following the speaker in your mind, realizing that the bus is over here and the speech is over here. So that if I go out and have a nice picnic over here, it doesn't make much sense. It's on the bus. The picnic should be here instead. And he gave a great example of a very dramatic speech. You can tell I'm laughing. A very dramatic speech about, it was really funny, about this poor person's mother's funeral. and how he's talking to his mother at the casket. And he's talking to her and telling her all of the things that he loves her and everything like that. A little later on in the speech, he comes over here and he's doing something else. And a little later on in the speech, they actually do go out and have a picnic and spread out their picnic and then start eating their lunch. And he was saying in the audience's mind, it just didn't fit. You know, you're having a picnic on the casket. So when you're writing your speech and when you're giving your speech, use holograms. Use the stage to mark different locations in your speech. This is now my bus. If I'm going to get on the bus, I'm going to come over here. That's the classroom over here. If I need to talk to the teacher, I'm going to come over here. The second thing he said was, use pauses. That was the thing that hit me the most. He said, you can tell the quality of the speaker mostly by how many pauses they use. Most people will write a 5 to 7 minute speech, writing 8 minutes worth of material and cramming it into 5 to 7 minutes. He says a world champion speaker will write 5 minutes of speech and lengthen out to 7 minutes. The challenge for your audience is that they haven't heard the speech before. So when you're asking them a question like, do you remember the most embarrassing incident from your childhood? You need to pause and let them think about it. You need to let them answer the question that you ask in your mind. And he gives a great example of this, where he gave his world champion speech, and he comes out and talks about falling on his face. And he actually falls on the stage on his face. And then he stays there. And he says, have you ever experienced a time when you are really embarrassed? And he says, fellow Toastmasters, distinguished guests, and he's still on the floor on his stomach. And he showed a videotape of this, and you can see his leg go up in the background. And he says, you see what my leg is doing? My leg is saying, you idiot, get up. You're embarrassing yourself. My body is fighting to get up to avoid this embarrassment. But inside my head, I'm counting 1001, 1002, trying to overcome my natural impulse. Why? Because pauses are so important. And pauses are very uncomfortable for the speaker. That's what I call respecting your audience, having a conversation with them. Talking to your audience as one person, and yet looking at all of them. Next speech will be about chicken and green beans.
Thank you so much, David. And will you all please